Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Hello, everybody, and good evening, and welcome very much to the first Climate Community Culture Scrutiny Panel. It's got a new name. Last year it was the Environment, Safety and Community Panel, but there's been some changes over from the portfolio that have been moved to different parts, and the culture part has come over to this scrutiny panel. So thank you very much for coming. Okay. Can I just draw all members to the first item on the agenda, which is that filming meetings. And these meetings will be filmed and recorded by the council for live or subsequent broadcast by the council's internet or by anyone attending the meeting using any communication method. Can I ask that we keep to the timings this evening and like the meeting to finish in 1.5 hours. Also remind officers to keep their introductions to reports as well as the responses to questions brief as possible so that we can focus on the questions. There have been apologies received by Councillor Ajay and she's here.
Okay, so the apologies received from Councillor Ajay and Councillor Adam, who's joining us online.
Councillor Adam, who's joining us online, welcome. And also Councillor Dikidis is attending.
Councillor Dikidis is running a little late, as is Ian Sygrave, so I just give apologies for lateness from those two.
Okay, thank you very much. They should be joining us as soon as possible. There are no items for urgent business. There's no. Okay, thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? No. Any online, any declarations of interest? No. Okay, thank you. There's no deputations, petitions, or presentations and questions?
None, Chair.
Okay. There's the minutes from the last meeting, which is from pages 1 to 8. Can we see that those minutes are approved? I've already read them and I can't see any particular errors because I was the one that was actually chairing it, so I'll sign it off.
So just as an update in terms of the actions on the previous minutes, there was an action around further information about social prescribing schemes within leisure centres. So an update was sent around a week or so ago to members. And the other action was around a further update to fly tipping. Having discussed that with officers, there wasn't anything comprehensive to update the panel on.
Yeah, because I did answer that, but they said that there wasn't an update. So, okay, thank you. Approve the minutes.
Yeah.
Membership and terms of reference, which is on page 9, page 48.
Okay, Chair. So what you have, what the members have in front of you is a report that sets out the terms of reference and the membership for the scrutiny panel for the year. A similar report went to the scrutiny committee on the 8th of June. The 4 panels that sit below the committee were formally established and concluded. So the membership and the terms of reference for those panels were formally established. So I guess in terms of this report, I would just draw your attention to paragraph 5, which sets out the membership for each of the panels.
Page is that?
So that is on page 10. And then appended to the report, you have an appendix A is the relevant bits of the council's constitution that set out the terms of reference and the role of scrutiny.
Yes.
That's on page 15. The responsibility functions, again, from the council's constitution, set out on page 18. Page 31, the second appendix, is the protocol for the Scrutiny Committee. So the Constitution is the overarching set of rules that all committee meetings are held to. Protocol is a subsequent document, basically to give a bit more detail about how we work and what expertise. That kind of just a bit more, bit more flesh.
Yeah. As we discussed these in the last meeting, when we were really essentially.
In your pack, you also have the protocol for non-voting co-opted members. So the panel does have a non-voting co-opted member. So this just sets out on that. And the final appendix is on page 43, which is probably the relevant part to you. So this sets out the remit for each of for the main screening committee. And so on page 45 is the areas which this panel has responsibility for. Just draw your attention to some changes from last year. So in terms of Councillor Chandwani's portfolio, and this panel is now responsible for local welfare. The committee is now responsible for.
We've got Councillor Mike Hackerton.
Yeah.
So
Councillor Hackerton, none of his portfolio has changed.
Okay.
In terms of what we're responsible for. So I believe that's basically the entirety of Councillor Hackerton's portfolio. Whereas Councillor Chandwani's portfolio, waste has gone to the main committee.
Okay.
And we've taken welfare.
And culture.
And yeah, and so for Councillor Arkle, it was the Cabinet for Culture Community responsible for culture.
Okay. So that's the main shift. Okay.
Yeah. So the report just asks you to note the report and all of the appendices. So we have to do so.
Yes, I know them. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You have Marshall instead of myself.
That's so the rogue version of the document.
Absolutely. Did you check?
Right, I will amend that.
Okay.
So thanks for pointing that out. I'll amend that.
What's
To the other one. If there's no other further questions.
No, can I move on then to the appointment of the non-voting co-op team, which is on page 49 to 52. 5 minutes is a short process and appoint.
Yeah, so
So is he there?
he's not here. Our co-op team is running late to consider meeting that was arranged before this one.
Okay.
I think it's a community safety meeting. So the next slide is commission. Yeah. So this by rule, so we have a non-voting co-opted member on the panel who is inside with. He is the chair of the neighbourhood watch, neighbourhood watch. So he's opted onto this panel by virtue of the fact that he represents a wider organisation. So rather than being an individual. This is just a process report that asks for approval to reappoint him. In the protocol set out in the previous report, there is to have the co-op teams. Yeah, that's probably a discussion we can have going forward, but if there is any.
Yeah, because yeah, I think that that's something that we have to consider going forward, especially in relation to what I would like to see, especially looked at, especially that I've raised it in the Casey report. So we do need to have somebody with some expertise, perhaps lived experience as a co-op team sitting on this panel so that their narrative can be placed for decision making. I don't know where we will look for that. I know there is an organisation within Broadwater Farm, which is actually run, I think, by the council themselves, who work with the youth. And I think that it would be really good if we could get some ambassadors from there to see whether they'd be interested in sitting on this panel to kind of enrich the conversations. because essentially my age, I don't really know what's going on too much with the youth right now. So it's to have that focus group and that voice central. So can we look into that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, yeah, members want to put forward some organisations that will look into.
Yeah, that would be really great, you know, because of when we start doing the scoping, it's really good to have more than one voice in the mix so that we can make executive things which we're going to ask the council to scrutinise as a critical friend. But, you know, we're not lone rangers in it, so that's why that's really important to do that.
So yeah, if I could just ask you to formally agree the recommendation to appoint.
Yes, 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 I agree. So then the next item on the agenda is the update from floodwater management report, which is on page 53 of the report pack. The lead is Anne Cunningham. You're a new Anne.
Yeah, I've changed.
What?
My alter ego. Unfortunately, and I'm sick, so I'll try.
Okay.
As best I can, Chair.
Okay, then.
And I was picking up on your observation earlier, and I'll try and be succinct. Back in July 2021, the borough experienced a torrential downpour, 2 occasions, this is 12th and 15th of July. With that, everybody flagged up the lack of drainage mains been going on in the quite some. Lots of the guys outside of critical drainage areas not really. So there's become more investment into routine gully cleansing, which has meant that over the last 12 months we've actually been around. There are a number of gullies that do still get filled up quite regularly, so there are some that were actually frequently cleansed, but equally there are other gullies that will get covered over time. So there's the reference to the where we actually try and work with local communities so they can actually clear at least from gullies. But in addition to the program of work we've been taking forward in relation to gully cleansing, we've also identified a number of completely blocked gullies which have been dug out, a number of locations where the gullies just haven't been connected, probably all the connection been severed. So we've actually done something. It also refers to sustainable drainage schemes that we've been taking forward. So we've just finished one of which is gestation, but we've got there and we're not taking forward the scheme at the moment after various votes. But the report picks up on the range of schemes that we are taking forward, as well as addressing some guides. It gives details, different types of sustainable drainage scheme measures you can introduce. So there are a range of these, and they do vary. But certainly in terms of we use the best that we can for the available spaces. So there's a lot of time we will actually look at using some of the past top location for water, because we know for a fact that the Thames Water's sewers are at beyond their capacity. So there's inside they just, and I'm sure you would have picked up in the news recently about how dire the situation is with Thames Water in terms of financial position. Imagine the benefit they're much make. But it depends on Thames Water to address funding issues. Yeah, reasonable. I don't think they're very much in the way. We've got to look at those. The report is a bit of a bold on to where we were. I'll stop at that point and happy to.
See whether you've got any questions. I have a few questions, but I'm going to open it up first.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, well, before I get questions, I just want to say thanks to Mark and the rest of the team that worked on the scheme, particularly Kelly and James for the traffic management, because it's been about 3 months, I think, 2-3 months, on a very, very busy junction, and I think it's been really well organised. So indeed, my thanks for them. It looks good. It will look better. Up the plant is still, I think that's going in October, but certainly in terms of the scheme of pastoral health, we get to one where people were not following the traffic management very quickly as a community, far and wide, on some of the changes. So it did become very problematic. We were fortunate that we actually had an additional drainage into those small with us at that time, picked up the scheme, pretty fantastic. He's now left the organisation, moved on to another authority. So we had him for the right period of time, but it's really good to have retained this question. Really pleased with them.
So my question, so I'm just wondering what's happening with the tank in Priory Park, whatever it's called, the reservoir, and also just on the balance between the cyclical scheme and the reactive stuff, the remedial work, and whether you have a kind of an SLA for the reactive stuff, because sometimes that can still be a little bit slow. If I recall stuff, it will still be a few weeks till exactly the same. And obviously we're in sports season at the moment, so it's quite important to get those kind of reactive stuff done.
Okay, so picking up on the tank of Priory Park first of all, one of the issues with that is the subject of ownership. It is our firm belief that tank, that underground reservoir, is the responsibility of Temple. Recently, Thames Water have written to us to say they don't think it is. And this goes back to when there was a transfer of responsibility to Thames Water PLC, I think it was back in the 70s or whatever it was. And with that, there was a change to Thames Water and the National Rivers Authority, who then became a private agency. And they make their claim through that transition process, it somehow became our responsibility. So our colleagues in legal have written a letter for us, which we've sent back to Thames Water, challenging their assertion, and we are waiting response. So as far as we're concerned, that tank is still their responsibility. That's it. We will not change it if they were to give us. We believe it's their responsibility.
It's not really functional at the moment.
No, and well, our concern is that when we did have that flooding back in the Priory Junction, it wasn't helped by the fact that Priory Park wasn't funding copies for alleviation. So we actually asked for evidence that tank was working as it should. And we got hold of some photographs of Thames Water that showed it's completely bone dry, and within a week of it being completely full. So we certainly do not believe the information we provided with that.
Just up on that, and said that there is some discrepancies about holes and stuff. Is there any timescales of when you can obtain that information, or can you hold them to account to make that decision? Because without the decision around ownership, then what will happen?
So, in a nutshell, no, we've gone back to them. My understanding from Ankit Shah, who's our lead lead representative for the lead local flood authority, is that this is something that Thames Water are looking to do across London. They're trying to push back on what they believe is something they need to try and push onto others. So we're almost being used to the test case. So this is sitting with lawyers, basically.
Okay.
And if it's with lawyers, it goes no longer. But as far as we're concerned, it is their responsibility. It is problematic because we have got a stick for some flood alleviation within Priory Park. Holes connecting into the pipe that goes into the underground reservoir. If that reservoir isn't working as it should do, then clearly all we're going to be doing is actually creating a storage problem that will not dissipate in the right way. So we're continuing to push. So in relation to the issue about cyclical remedial, so what Tom Henry, who's the group engineer on this, is trying to do in conjunction with Mark Farmer in particular, is to try to come up with a scenario whereby we are maintaining those at the appropriate frequency, not just a standard. But we've been analysing the rate at which we have to go back on a reactive basis. Some of the big things that every quarter, every 6 months, every year. Some of them we can actually get away with actually not doing everything for over 2 years, but they're going to be, I think, fairly few and far between. In relation to the ability to get Marlborough in, one of the things that we do think about is that when we do have a yellow warning, we provide a case. So if we do get a situation, if we do have some floods, we do that. With an amber situation, it's slightly more difficult because there's a lot of cost involved in having that vehicle on standby, and if the rain doesn't actually fall, then we're wasting. For those circumstances, that's where our own staff will go out and try to resolve the problem. A lot of the time, here because cleaning and something else, and getting that response. There is still a lot of work that Margaret still going through that. Right, weeks on.
I mean that if you if a resident reports it through the app, then actually they're going to be waiting for when that road gets hit by the cyclical, rather than.
No, not necessarily, because if there is an identified issue, I mean, I've just, as I was walking up here today, I've noticed that there was a gully on High Road by Crescent Gardens. So that's something I've spotted, that should be functioning. So I would expect Marlborough to, the drainage team to issue that to Marlborough and again. I think that should be a matter. If it's a real flooding issue that's going to be causing great concern, it should be long. That one, I think we can actually. So there's a judgment as to how fast you actually see. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Dunstall.
Yeah, my question was just really in relation to so are we stepping in doing what's it that's a moving discussion.
It's a real difficult situation. It's the Leeds Local Flood Authority. We can look into the causes of flooding in any location. We end up doing 10. A lot of the time, it will be down to capacity within that. So, they were built in Victorian times, as covered in the report. So they were designed with a certain capacity. That it wasn't, that capacity wasn't on the basis of everyone having their gardens paved over, for example. So one might argue that as the local authority, we've allowed that to happen with gardens and people. They don't have allowed that water then to discharge into the sewer. In some respects, we're looking at this and thinking, well, what can we do to alleviate some of the additional pressures we to we have actually got potentials to come out and some of their sewers. But it needs actually send one some additional guns that alleviate some of the problem and the provision of those on that reduce the flow. The other bit that we've actually are working with colleagues and planning on is efficient the highway. Because the highway zones. So one of the things we could start to look at from an enforcement perspective is where that's happened, do we start taking through enforcement action? So basically there's a grill across the edge of that driveway and discharging into a soakaway within that person's problem. The way in which planning guidance is set up at the moment is that if anyone actually is taking it forward, the paving of their job should be with water absorption material, so it still basically soaks into the ground, or there is some channeling processing to go back, because that so we want the water to go into the ground to provide the trees. So there's a whole raft of issues. In we are covering up So I think that address the shortcomings we may have had in the past where there hasn't been that open collective thought about what the cumulative impact of letting localised development. When the hit reviews in place as a prelude and act, there's something called Schedule 3 to that act, which enabled their local authorities to have a far greater control over the paving over of gardens, but got quite diluted. Just felt as though that was a bit too onerous on the local authorities to kick back. Section 3 has never really been introduced. The opportunity to be more important.
Yeah, that's following some of that. That's it. Not on joint own for one thing, which is better, but we don't really have a huge.
Okay.
I have three questions. Yeah, I have three questions, then I have one for you.
Any online? Any questions online? No? Okay.
No, Michelle, we can't hear you very well.
Okay, I will speak up. Can you hear me now? Gina,
Yeah,
can you hear me?
the sound cuts off. It goes on and off. So we can't follow you exactly.
Okay, I'll try and speak as much as I can.
Thank you.
I'll ask everybody in the room to as
Try
well.
to speak as loud as I can as well.
Yeah.
At the moment, but there was a level which I quite asked this in the last shout.
Otherwise we'll be screaming. Okay. Okay, there's a question that I have for you. It is on 4.2, page 54 on the flooding. It says that the updated page with useful advice on flooding, you've updated the page. I did actually go on there and look for myself. And I was just wondering, is there any other mechanism to heighten awareness? Because there's still digital poverty in the borough.
Yeah,
And there's still people that are quite marginalised communities. And if we've only got one resource to update, because I remember the two floodings quite vividly, especially within my own ward in Seven Sisters and the mayhem that it caused, and my surgeries were packed afterwards. So I'm just wondering if there's any other mechanisms the council are using so that the advice on flooding is not just concentrated on the people who are digitally wealthy.
To my knowledge, obviously it's there's the ability to actually have digital messaging put through mobile phones, so social media as well as the web. So then social media is an alternative in some respects. So
Yeah.
it up that way. And on the whole, most people have a mobile phone these
Yes.
days anyway, so that's one way. On the whole, I think is trying to pull back on printed material anyway, because it is quite costly. A lot of the stuff that we might generate by print never actually gets read anyway. So
But there are other
So-
mechanisms like on lampposts, there are posters.
yeah, but it's very difficult to really get a clear message out. Obviously in relation to some of the use of lamppost wraparounds, you can do that for a localised scene, but it's very difficult for doing something that's very generic like floodwater management. So we would expect that if people do have an issue on that, they can still contact customer services, seek advice. A lot of which we don't actually have, etc. It's very difficult to pick up and do an awful lot more than we've done thus far. I think the report also refers to the multi-agency flood plan.
Yeah, I did notice that because when you go on the website, unfortunately, a lot of the time the information is embedded. It's not just there. You have to seek and find it.
You do.
And when there is a flood and there is an emergency, people are quite heightened relative anxiety. Are they going to be able to source that? So I'm just thinking strategically, the drip effect, that if it's embedded in your memory and you know what to do, how do you heighten that visibility in the community so that they know that they have that resource from touch? And that's just something I can also take away and ask the cabinet to have a look at it. Maybe that's a piece of work. We
I like that plan words. Check out a sense of drip, and so given the subject matter, But one thing you may or may not be aware of is the fact that the website is being
Okay.
in terms of actually making it more user friendly.
Okay.
It is quite compelling. But that's also been the case. So making that website simplistic in terms of on the web page, but also particularly on mobile phone.
Yeah.
It's really key. So that piece of it.
Okay.
That might address some issues.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So on that point, Chair, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
After the 21 summer good meeting that we had between Residents Association for Glaston and Tivoli, there was the basements were affected there. I think Tom Henry was involved and Andrew Meek. And I'm just wondering whether there's an opportunity for particular areas that have been identified as high risk, see whether there's a residents association or some group born out of COVID or whatever, and do in public meetings or teams or do something, whether that's through ward councils or through the council, just to kind of be a little bit more proactive in the community on because I think people don't think about it until it
That's right.
that's always the case. That's in particular.
The other question I have is improved flood reporting. How and where is this information? Because I was looking for it.
So that's where I was referring to the multi-agency plan. So there's a piece of work that's still to be done.
Okay.
So with Councillor Cameron is the lead cabinet member for this area.
Okay.
There's a piece of work that needs to be presented back to the moment.
Yeah.
So as and when she returns, then we can think of the other initiatives in this space and general base.
Okay. And then I can pick that up. Final question before I hand it over. Yes. Sorry, Ian. Is 5.3. It talked about 10 Park Lane drainage system. But in my ward, there was other areas where they had severe flooding.
Yep.
One was in Seven Sisters Ward, St Anne's Bridge. The whole place was flooded out, rising water. It was all on the pavement, affected the cars. But I looked in the whole the mapping, and it showed where they were. And that one wasn't mentioned. So I'm just wondering how there was severe flooding in that place. And I'm just wondering, what is the strategy for that area? As you go around Seven Sisters, St Anne's Bridge, the bridge, there's drains there.
This is right.
Yeah, and it was completely flooded.
So
and where that island was full of water.
yeah, so Seven Sisters Road is a road maintained by Transport for London.
Okay.
So that makes it somewhat problematic. We can actually raise issues with TFL. Very much dependent on their much. So there might be a limitation. I would think, even though it would be a TFL road, that would have appeared in one of the 3 section 19 reports due to the time in area. I would think.
I went and I looked in St Anne's. It's the St Anne's part, and I looked at the roads around there. There were some roads that were identified, but that one was a major road that was completely flooded. But now you're saying it's under TFL. That makes perfect sense why it wasn't in this report. Nevertheless, I want to know what the push is for those roads that run through our borough, and TFL, what's their responsibility and what are they going to do to ensure that, to rectify the situation, because the burden then comes into myself and Barbara's surgery when. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you. Can I just begin with apologies for later on when I did send an email to
Yes, you did listen to your apologies.
So first of all, thank you to the officer who actually shows the different types of studs. Because had I been asked on Mastermind the difference between a detention or a retention case, I would say, hopefully now I will succeed. So thank you for whoever did that. But moving on, I noticed that you say that there are 15,700 gullies, which obviously need attention within the borough, and they are over a period low, medium and high priority, which is absolutely fine. So if we take all of those together, that including the lowest priority, that would mean that they would all be done every 2 years. So are we at the end of a cycle whereby all of those have been done? Or are we in the middle of a first 2-year cycle whereby only some have been done? Apologies if that's already been asked.
That's fine. I'm covered up. We have actually gone around and done all of the gullies. So from this point on, framework of action. So, some goes 3 months, 6, 12, and 24.
So we are now at the beginning of a new.
There's the second beginning of 2-year cycle.
Yeah. Does that include somewhere like Harringay Passage, which I have been agitating for? I'm sorry, that's a very specific example, and I should be more strategic. But that passageway, which obviously runs right the way through from virtually Finsbury Park to Turnpike Lane. Yeah. There are drains there which have been blocked for a very long time, and when it rains, half the paving there gets flooded. As far as I know, they've not been done in years.
So they've been footway.
Sorry?
Are they footway?
It's a footway going, yes.
Okay, so I'm not 100% sure of actually footway gullies. That might be a piece of work that is outstanding. But thank you for bringing that. Taking that back to the directions team to see and make sure we've had because I've actually mentioned a few footway gullies that I'm not going to.
Okay.
Any other questions from the floor?
Just on where flooding is by virtue of depressions in the road network or whatever, because that would be a highways thing. For example, you can on Station Road actually, the cycle lane heading towards Wood Green from Isaac Palace because dips not where there's a gully. Is there plans to manage that as well? Because in some areas it just ponds indefinitely and literally becomes a pond with life and whatever else, right?
In locations like that, we'd probably look at a rainwater garden to try and alleviate some of the problem. Maybe if we could look at putting a gully in, to typically go like low point connections and sewer, but if it makes more sense for us to do rainwater garden, we could go down that route. But certainly, instance, that's an opening now.
Okay, and do a report. And on rainwater gardens, is the council looking at as the opportunity to do this small pockets where parking was.
In some instances, yeah.
And could that be a thing that could be requested? Parking bays removed for drainage purposes? Yeah, I mean, there becomes like both pocket, park and drainage and everything in one go. Yeah, could have a new tree planting, whatever. Absolutely. So, I mean, I can think of Adams Road as one like where we've used some of the road space and actually put the rainwater garden in there. Did it right, actually thinking about putting road gardens in. So, this is on a section of W line, but it's a location where we use road space in a different way to tackle the drainage problem, rather than actually thinking of how do we give food and water. And then, like then in terms of that particular, you've the arrangement to garden is the best option. Yeah, okay, great, thanks for that.
Okay, so we will be moving on. Next item on the agenda is 10. It's an update on recent cabinet decisions report on page 65. And that's over to you again, Mark.
Sorry, I just give a really quick introduction to the report. So, I've drafted a report here based on a number of cabinet decisions that have been taken since March. Some of them very significant that fall within the remit of this panel. So I think the purpose of this report was twofold. One was to give you a general update on some decisions that are happening, so just general update. And secondly, I thought this might segue quite nicely into the book. In terms of if there's anything in here. Updates of the year. So very briefly, I won't really go into the detail because I have not. So, just to sort of highlight the cabinet decisions included in the report include a School Street scheme in Devonshire Hill. There's a review of essential parking permits, footway parking review, floodwater management investment plan, which previous item was put in on the parking investment plan, the road danger reduction investment plan, highways and street lighting, and then there was the engagement policy and a school screening plan. So within the report is a short update on each of those reports. Okay. And I have a couple of officers here who may be able to answer any questions. So, anything we don't know, I can take away and get that for next time.
So like I said, it's offering you a segue into covering some of these the subject matters in more detail in future basis of the plan, where we can come back and you can relevant officers sit in
Okay.
to actually answer your questions. The actual specifics rather than generality.
Anybody got any specific questions on this? Okay, councillor.
Can I ask specific questions about different parts, can I? Is that okay?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
fine.
Okay.
Brief.
Yeah, so brief. So first is on footway parking review. And I couldn't really understand why that had changed from the original three tranche. I think it was a three tranche approach. I think we're supposed to be already in tranche 2 or tranche 3. And then if a CPZ review was happening, that was supposed to be, it would coincide with the CPZ review. All of that seems to just didn't happen. And we're on a new plan policy. So just why that was, that's question. Question 2 was on the road danger reduction investment plan, which is all good, but I'm just wondering why some of the schemes that have public consultation take so long to come through. And third is on highway and street lighting plan, specifically lighting. There appears to be a real issue with lighting at the moment in the borough, namely lights either being on 24/7 or off 24/7. Yeah, that just that to a level I've not. I mean, I'm getting correspondence about time at the moment, and I just walk around and I see it all the time. And I'm just wondering whether that is a kind of a fundamental issue with the rollout, or something that's just there's not enough staff or being worked through.
Okay, so I'll try my best to answer those. In relation to footway parking policy, one of the issues was that the team that was looking at how to implement it with no real guidance as to what they should be doing of the process. So for that reason, we discussed with Councillor Chairman that we should develop a policy. So we developed the policy. The report that went through in April. So it's actually to give some firm guidelines as to what we should be doing. So if we're looking at from, say, an active travel perspective, ultimately what we should do, the footways, which are originally built for people to walk upon, should primarily be available for people to walk upon. But there might be circumstances whereby that just may not be. So it's to give some real context and give some guidance to officers as to how they might want. But in terms of taking that forward, there would be things like CPZs, etc., where we might be introduced measures that might limit the amount of parking and thereby open or remove footway parking, and therefore try and take it through in a more coordinated way, rather than just trying to this sort of sporadic approach of sort of doing a bit in there. So it's just a broader bit of framework and
Intention still for every road with pavement.
every locations where we have footway parking, but the idea would be and just try to prioritise it in some way. It's just that the team that will be involved in that is completely overwhelmed. Probably not done like I would like, and everyone else would really. Particularly those with this, by walking along some of our footways quite hard. It then also ties back into something we're looking at within increased amount of enforcement, because a lot of the time a footway can actually be narrowed purely because of overgrown shrubs, etc. in people's garden. Like if we're not enforcing that to actually make sure that's cut to the highway boundary, it can then create a problem. Which, if that was actually addressed, then there wouldn't be a need necessarily to think about removing the footway parking. So there's a complete blend on that. In relation to the road danger reduction stuff, I think I've asked that question of Kant as well, but in terms of a lot of the schemes we've got going forward through Danny Go. They are all on the full plan. The reports I've seen, I think all of them now, so they're ready for sign off. So there wasn't any particular issue. I think it's just a case of just working through those and making sure we've addressed all the objections that have come up through the session process. But I think we're looking to implement every single one of them.
That same with CPZ reviews that 6-7 months ago.
Again, it's sort of it's down to the level of resources we've got to just working from. But I mean, certainly in terms of those radiation reductions, we're looking to again something to when it's beyond the side. So that would be a change plan, but we will try to actually keep those.
Yeah. Okay.
In relation to the street lighting, we do have a problem with the, I think it's the photoelectric cells that don't seem to be behaving. There are quite a few of these, and the central management system that should be controlling it, there's a bit of a problem in terms of the connectivity between two. So if the photoelectric cell isn't working, the management system knows it might be picking it up, and there is a talk with some of us here. So I know that Ken Weeks is trying to work his way through with those, with the manufacturer to get all of that replaced. So whilst we've got a long way towards getting all of the lighting converted to LED, we have this slight residual issue.
I mean, the issue, I mean, I feel like is Ken the only person that works on lighting? Because I mean, he literally answers every single email on it, and maybe that's a resourcing issue. But when something is raised, it's certainly not. I mean, it could be 6, 7, 8 months, and it's chasing and chasing and chasing. And often the response will be, yeah, it's fixed. And you go back and it's not fixed at all. And then it gets raised as a new one. And this could be 3 months again, and then 3 months again. And so I appreciate there'll be instances where there are, where the element isn't picked up until it. But there's also instances where it is flagged and flagged and flagged and flagged, not just by council, but by members of the public.
If I know that we had this similar issue with Drake, what's happened is that chief executive, because there was a problem in terms of the perception of the ombudsman in us not dealing properly with complaints. There's a change whereby all the system directors must sign inquiries, stage 1 complaints, etc. So I get to see them all now, and I've certainly seen a tendency in relation to street lighting for the same complaints going. I've now seen 3 times, so I start to pick up on the thing that there's definitely an issue within the street. It isn't the only one in there, but the one that relied on is a few people, but there aren't that many in that team anyway. But it's something I start to question Tom Henry about. Is there an underlying issue here in terms of the performance of Marlborough, or is there a more fundamental issue? I think there's an issue with performance. They're doing in terms of their testing and the reliability of that. There is also this problem with the equipment overall, which came.
But you don't check. There's no officer that checks. Marlborough says something's fixed.
It should be checkable through the central management system, and I say a degree of night scouting. So I would expect a degree of night scouting still to be going on. But if it isn't, then we should be still picking it up until such time to be confident.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions on this? There's one thing that I would like to ask. Hoping that you'd be able to answer it. If not, it can be taken outside. It's about review of the essential service permits.
Yeah.
5.2 on page 68 says that the essential service permits supports local authority services, NHS professionals, charities, faith groups, organisations to provide healthcare counselling for social care and Haringey residents, and the scheme is designed to meet the needs of those who rely on a car to deliver essential services to these residents. Having read through it, there still seems to be a charge for these organisations.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if that is more of a deterrent. The reason I'm saying that is because I raised when the LTNs were introduced, I've raised several social care issues where social care providers were no longer going to the residents' homes because it was too costly and it wasn't, they weren't making enough money to go there. And equally, residents were left for long periods of time without care. My concern is that Harrogate is increasingly having an aging population. Some of them will rely on care. Why is there a charge for the professionals to go in there? Especially the charities. I can understand the NHS, but the charities, and especially domiciliary care.
So just trying to see, I think there's another paper on the list which talks about. It's the care at home permit. The care at home, I think it might have been an earlier meeting. Care at home permit should address that particular issue, whereby a resident who is in receipt of care can actually apply for a care at home permit. Give that permit to anybody who's coming to their home to provide them with any type of care free of charge.
Okay.
So, and that is the solution to this particular issue. So
Okay.
the essential service permit ultimately would be to those organisations that are providing that care, who arguably could afford it, but we do know that what some of those organisations are doing, especially rather than carrying the cost themselves, they're putting it to the carer. So under those circumstances, with the carer then starts thinking, oh, well, this is just costing me to do that. Therefore, the person receiving care is the money.
Are the carers aware of this? I mean, what information is going out there?
We have actually been, we consulted at length with some of the organisations and some of the carers that we do know about. So, and they were really supportive of the approach that we were taking. To the case, we're just making a little bit behind on the roll out of that. It's something.
Yeah, I would like to have.
It is something that is being taken forward. Very much, and it will address that situation.
I'll pick that up with them because I'm quite concerned about that. Equally about the LTNs, will there be provision for them to be able to drive their cars to get to?
Yeah.
Because you might have. I'm a social worker by trade, so I know sometimes I go out there might be about 5 visits that you have to do in a short period of time. If you're doing care and will there be those concessions for those essential car users to be able to get to their
Slight digression, but I mean, in
the next situation.
On Tuesday, where we had the review of the LTNs as part of the cabinet agenda for the evening, and one of the things that we've done is look at the exemptions process. Got that at the moment is a little bit too rigid. So one of the decisions subject to is that everyone who has a blue badge in the borough will be entitled to drive into the LTNs borough. So that's opening up restrictions that was there beforehand, whereas beforehand we were operating on, if you lived in, let's just say zone A, you'd only get the permission to get through that. This is actually allowing it fully opening up across the entire process. In addition to that, there's also changes for send track education. They've actually been built out quite a lot of the diagonal filters, which are actually only for emergency access. So we've picked up the fact that that's been problematic. We're actually making a change so that those vehicles will actually have every those filters. In relation to the other point about care, was one of the 3 deputations on Tuesday from a group that perhaps hadn't been heard beforehand quite clearly, where they were saying that as informal carers, they were finding it really hard to get to some locations. Now, we are going to reach out to that particular group of individuals and find out what the particular issues are. Ultimately, every home is still accessible. So we just want to find out why that's been problematic. But even under those circumstances, the individual circumstance option under the sessions applications process could apply so they could potentially get an exemption.
Okay.
And there has been a lot of relaxation from the start of the process where essentially nobody was really getting any sort of exemption at all. We've actually worked our way through dealing with the NHS, trying to assess those involved in that, and we're just gradually working it through to make sure that we're not putting at risk those people or to disadvantage those people who are in most people care.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for that update. There's no further questions.
That's
Oh, sorry. I apologise.
It's just on the road safety speed.
road danger reduction.
Yeah. There's an aspiration for roads to be.
Yep.
Some of those TfL ones remain 30 miles an hour.
Right.
Some of the ones, I guess I want to know a bit more about how we can liaise. I know it's difficult with TfL. How we can liaise with TfL around those discussions. So a number of kind of arterial TfL roads are 20 miles an hour. Whether some of them remain 30 miles an hour, and for some of those roads, as we know, travel 40 to 60, especially on the outer bit of the borough, where they're coming off the North Circular and into gates. And they are very, very dangerous roads. We may not have had a lot of this. Is the second question, I suppose. We may not have had a lot of fatalities or serious injuries on, but that doesn't mean they are not high risk. So as part of that monitoring process that we've obviously undertaken, how are we prioritising what strikes me as quite a small budget for these ongoing works? Is it the case that we can only target our money into places where very sadly people have had serious or fatal accidents, or are we actually able to say, objectively, we look at this road and it's incredibly dangerous for these reasons, so we're going to address that as a preemptive thing?
But in terms of TfL roads, they have actually reduced some of the speeds on some of those roads down to 20, 30, down to 30 as well. But there are some other roads that are still 30 mile an hour or 40 mile an hour. Arguably, we need to get our own house in order because we have our own roads that are still 30, which are the ones that we are looking at. And Waterbury Way, for example, is a 40 mile an hour road. So in some respects, we can't really turn around to the TfL and give them a hard time if we haven't actually got our own house in order. So part of the process is to actually work our way through. So I'll just pull up an email here which says that we've got a speed survey and analysis for the speed data. So we know how big the problem we have. And that's going to be reviewed by Danny Garrett, who sort of mentioned the program. That's due to be looked at by him the first week in August. In terms of the accident levels, though, I think that one thing that we have picked up is the bigger problem is actually associated with power two-wheelers. So I motorbikes and motors, etc., rather than a lot of time there's a lot of lobbying from the cyclists that they're the ones that are breaking through it. But in terms of the report on the road danger reduction action plan and investment plan, we picked up their wheelers and then it's cyclists. So we're trying to shift the emphasis on that. So we did some survey work earlier this year on a power two-wheeler study just to try and analyse that. And I've met with some of the sort of the leads in that area who are looking for things such as access to bus lanes. There are some locations where they can use bus lanes at the moment and actually keep it safer, but not all of those. So part of the study is looking at that. So again, we've got a draft report through from the consultants which started to look at, and it's broken down into phase 1 is collision analysis, stage 2. Phase 2 is generating options, and phase 3 is feasibility and evaluation of options. We're working on that phase 3 stage at the moment, and moving towards the phase 4, which is implementation. So it's actually about trying to pick out that particularly vulnerable group in relation to increased safety on our road network, not just on ours. TfL, I think every TfL bus lane and motorbike can use. That's where there's a differential again. So again, it's a case of us getting our house in order before we go back to TfL to challenge that. But having said that, we are now actually working more closely with TfL
So we've actually got a better dialogue going in terms of. A couple of months ago, we met with, I think it was about 4 TFL members who wanted to know more about better reduction action, how it's hiding the approach they're taking, what we can experience on the shared learning. So we are starting to build those relationships.
Questions? Any online? That's like more things going. So, can I move on to?
Yeah, I think, excuse me.
Yes, please do.
Good to go.
Yes,
Thank you.
officers, please feel free. Yeah, the officer line.
Yeah.
Joe,
Joe, can you hear us? You're okay to go.
Thank you.
See you, Mum.
Nice seeing you. Talk again soon.
thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Mike.
Yes, so the last item on the agenda, the last substantive item on the agenda is the work plan. So what you have in front of you on page 97 is just a short little report setting out the background of the work plan and how it's formulated. The draft work plan is at page 101. Obviously, it's the first meeting of the municipal year, so there's not a great deal in here. I guess what I had envisaged was, first of all, maybe just a sort of round table discussion about what items you might like to see coming forward this year. And maybe we could pull together a list of bullet points, and then after the meeting, think about when to schedule them in, what item would best suited to the meeting kind of thing. If you want to put around anything that would like to raise and
Philip, I think that I did state you something. We had a discussion and I can't remember to collate all the thoughts in my head. Did you write them down somewhere?
So, it's on my laptop, which I'm using it still.
Okay.
Yes, but I can circulate them around afterwards in an email.
Did you send me the email? Did you send me the email back to me?
Thanks, have a good evening.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Let's not do that because.
Yeah, you can see your personal business. Yeah.
Yeah, apologies about that. I'm trying to remember.
There's 3 different items. Anyway, let's go around the room. Anybody got anything that they would like?
I've got a couple of thoughts. First one is around road safety and speeding and, the achievement or otherwise 20 miles an hour across the borough. The second one is we have kicked off an initial process around re-tendering of waste services. Could be re-tendered if I'm not wrong next year, 2024.
Yes, that's what I'm not sure if that's.
I'm wondering whether there's any mileage in some oversight of what's going on. Residents.
Yeah, so I just put the main committee has taken responsibility for waste. So I think in recognition of the fact that it's obviously a big strategic overlaps there. So I think that might be something we put up to the main committee. Yeah, and I'm sure you could be involved in that discussion when it comes.
Lighting, I think that there is an issue. I would like to explore a little bit more about exactly what the issue is, because I don't think it is just the signalling issues. I think there's a wider issue there. But then lighting more generally across the borough, things like safety. Do we have dark spots? Do we need to improve certain areas? And I know that there are, for example, some gaps where you have these roads that are unadopted. And so the council doesn't necessarily take ownership of them, and they themselves can become quite dangerous. And then lighting in parks. So I want to something on lighting as a whole piece, if possible. I agree on the kind of the road danger safety thing, 20 miles an hour, and that as well. And as a kind of a left field one, I suppose. The electric vehicle charging network feels like at the moment our policy is just we have one provider and we roll out a small number every year and that's about it. And we need more than that if we're going to actually kind of get those 2030 things. So we need to be looking at different ideas, how people charge when they don't have driveways. Should we be looking at multiple providers rather than just North London or whatever? How do we hold those providers accountable? All that kind of world, ideally.
Thank you. The one thing that I was very impressed about was the Casey report. And I recognise that there have been 2 uprisings in Tottenham.
Yeah.
One in 1985 and the other one in 2011. And I really want to look at how we work collaboratively with the police. In the early 2000s, we had a Not Another Drop campaign, which was a very good strategic program about combating knife crime. And it was quite effective. And I feel that a lot of resources were put behind that. And, you know, Stephen James at the time, who was the police commissioner for Haringey, was very visible and it improved relationships. That's kind of gone to the wayside. I want to know how we're going to bring it back to the point, how we're going to work more effectively with the police, their understanding of institutional racism, the impact it has, and how we're going to improve relationships so that the next generation does not have to come and experience what we've experienced. The report was quite damning. And essentially, we're tired. As a Black person, I'm tired of reports. I'm tired of you telling me what I already know. I want to be effective, work in partnership with you to improve the situation for us and the misogyny as well that is there. So I would like to bring the police. I mean, we can't tell them what to do, but I think that's still Adam's portfolio, isn't it?
It is, yeah. So one of the areas of responsibility that the panel has is around the community safety partnership, which is obviously jointly chaired by the Borough Commander. The Borough Commander invariably comes to one of the meetings in the year and gives a presentation around police priorities, and then there is an opportunity to ask questions. So ordinarily that's around the November meeting.
Okay.
So obviously the Borough Commander, we will get her to come in. I would suggest the next meeting, which is in sort of early to mid-September, busy person. We'll certainly get her to come in November, and you can ask for a particular report around
safety.
Sort of. Well, so I think there's a bit of a case report.
Yes.
What's been done to tackle some of the sort of the issues that were out there.
Yeah.
And obviously, if there is anything else, we can put that to her as well. I mean, in the meantime, I'm happy you could ask the captain on to the next meeting if you have any questions about it. If that's something you'd like to do.
I would like to do that. I'd like to address it sooner rather than later. I would like to understand what strategies they have in place, how they are working to address all the recommendations that were set out in the Casey report. And how they're working, in cohesion with the police, because that is going to be more effective. I believe that will keep the fire burning and it keep the forefront of the mind as a priority for this borough.
Can I just follow on from that? I've just come from a meeting with, let's say, with Rona Hunt, who is Superintendent Deputy to Caroline Hayes, the Borough Commander, and she said that the new version of the turnaround plan, which was put out and consulted on recently, as you know, is being published either tomorrow or Monday. And the new name for it is a new Met for London. So instead of being called the Commissioner's Turnaround Plan, it's a new Met for London. And this document, she said, embodies all of the aspirations of the Casey report. And there's a meeting next Tuesday, which stakeholders, including myself and others, have been invited to, at the Lady Centre in Camden Road, which Caroline Hayes and indeed the Commissioner got over at R10. So it does look as though, the wheels are in motion. That leads me rather neatly on to the point which I made in my email to all of you, and this may not be to talk about it, but I did say that I have concerns about the title of the panel. if you remember. At the moment, we have this rather sort of nifty alliterative title, climate, community and culture, which sort of rolls off the tongue, but we've lost the word safety, community safety. And as the chair has just said, it's one of the key elements of the scrutiny that we do. Community safety name hasn't been lost for the cabinet member. Adam is still the cabinet for community safety.
Yeah.
The council was just consulting on the new community safety strategy, which is all over the latest issue of Haringey People. And yet, we've had that name removed from our title, which seems to me to be totally inconsistent. I had a discussion with Matt about this at the opening of Tottenham Police Station the other day. And he just said it was sort of to keep the name short and snappy and whatever, but he was totally open to, if we put forward an idea to the committee, of having the word safety added if we felt it appropriate. And so I said I would happily bring it to the panel and see what members thought. And he said if they thought that they liked to call it climate, community safety and culture, then that could be put forward to the main committee, which you chair would be on.
Yes.
And hopefully they would agree to change it. So that would be my take. I'd like to propose that we do add the word safety. I don't know what other members think, but yeah.
I think that's unanimous to say that we do agree, because a large proportion of what we look at is safety.
And it's so topical.
And it's really in the forefront of people's minds, and it's all over the media, and it's a very high profile thing.
I mean, to me, community and community safety are not the same thing.
Yeah.
It might ignore you, but it's very, very implicit. I think we need to make it explicit in the sign. And for the sake of one more word, what the hell?
Yeah, so that's absolutely fine. So we can put up a report to the next Scrutiny Committee on it, and they agreed that that's done.
Yeah, and our chair can make the case as a member of that commission.
Yes.
So the meeting, I believe, on the 24th of July.
Great.
So yeah,
That's very soon. That's good.
Yeah.
Great. So by the time we meet again in September, who knows?
Yeah, just on what you wanted to bring on forward. Work plan, not forward plan.
Yes.
Work plan. Just following on that, I would certainly be interested in what the kind of the vision is for community policing in the borough, because I do feel like it really does vary by ward quite significantly, particularly in terms of relationships with council, relationship with the community, shops, all of that, literally 2 wards next to each other. It's a completely different feel, communication, and there doesn't really seem to be that consistency. I know that there's always the goal of, X number of PCSOs and X number of whatever. That's not quite the same as having the same consistent availability, communication channels, forums, and all that sort of thing. So I would like to explore wards that are working well, wards that aren't, where the Met can work with the council to get to a place where we as councillors and the community feel like the police is embedded within the community. I don't think we're there. We're far from there at the moment anyway. Yeah.
And everybody's working in a different silo.
Yeah.
Even in my ward, there's different parts of the ward where there's more visibility, where the relationship is better, and there's other parts of it where it's quite hostile and tense. So I think there needs to be some form of uniformity about how they work, how they engage, what's their strategy, what's their engagement tools, what they use, what forums do they use to be able to engage the community. Because policing is about care as well, and how you engage the communities, how you get the best relationships working. It's not just about going in with brute force and ignorance. If there's an incident, and I really do not want to. And unfortunately, Tottenham is known, Haringey per se, but Tottenham 1985 and 2011, you just say it and everybody knows what happened there. So, we really do put the bull by the balls, as it were, and address it.
Okay, that's a pretty good list, and something to work for. So I can pull those together. We can have a further discussion about scheduling them into sort of particular meetings and which cabinet members you'd like to attend which meeting.
Okay.
So yeah, that's really helpful. The only thing I was going to suggest was in terms of doing a piece of scrutiny work, I think you expressed an interest in doing something around community relations and policing.
Yes.
So I don't know if anyone else had anything they would like to put forward or any sort of aspects of community that haven't already been discussed. Right. So again, I think that's something we can take forward offline in terms of engagement.
And visibility, I mean, that's the number one I get is we never see our police anymore. They don't turn up for burglaries anymore. They don't do whatever. So, you know, that kind of.
No visibility at all.
Yeah.
Well, actually, the safer neighbourhood officers that are in theory allocated to get hold of.
Of course. Yeah, and then when you do see them, it's kind of, here's, you know, 100 outside this first stadium, or here's 100 outside this, and they're all in one place, which is a completely different thing to the community policing thing, which is just you want to see a Bobby on the beat kind of thing involved, don't you? Yeah.
And we've got any other urgent business?
So they're onto the urgent business chair now.
Okay, and the future meeting dates, can people take a note of them, please? It's on the 11th of September, the 6th of November, the 19th of December, and the 27th of February. Those dates, yeah. Okay, then, thank you very much. Thank you for being here. Thank you. Online. You know,
Bye-bye, Nina. I can see you.
we can't even hear us. Meeting is adjourned.